Tamara, thank you ever so much for coming down today. Today's podcast, Changing Focus, is all around females, neurodiversity and ADHD. I broke down a list of your accolades that I'd just like to run through and to correct me if there's anything that I've missed or that's wrong. So Dr. Tamara Russell, neuroscientist, chartered clinical psychologist, author, leading mindfulness innovation, black belt in karate, kung fu, 2 PhDs and international research about how mindfulness can restructure the brain, and lecturer. That's quite a bit. What have I missed? Have I missed anything?
You haven't missed anything. And yeah, I guess what I want to say to any of the women out there or young girls out there with ADHD is that it is possible. It is possible to achieve and to do these things, but it's a lot of hard work too.
So if we start from the beginning then, around neurodiversity, like a brief explanation, and we spoke before around sort of like neurodiversity and the complexities of sort of like the diagnostic criteria, and you're quite good explaining it to people in layman's terms, as I sort of put it. So if you can give me a general overview of neurodiversity, what it includes.
Yeah, so I think probably your viewers, particularly those that are sort of our age, are aware that the language of neurodiversity has certainly moved very much out of specialist services and into the mainstream. So to me, it sometimes feels like we're almost talking about two different things. There's sort of like the old way of thinking about neurodiversity, which is very much was based on a deficits model. Like these are people that have a problem with their brain or they have learning difficulties. I mean, the language is always changing, right? First it was learning disabilities, then it was learning difficulties, now it's learning challenges. The more modern view is it's a brain that processes information in a different way.
Yeah.
It's a brain that's motivated to attend to different sources of information in different ways. But typically we're talking about a cluster which often includes autism, ADHD, dyslexias, acalculias, some of those more sort of specialist problems that people might have with numbers or with words or with spelling. But it's essentially a brain that is struggling to meet the world as the world has been designed.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating, I think, about being alive in this moment in time is we're beginning to be more open to the fact that the world that we've designed could be different.
Yeah.
And serve more people in more healthy ways.
So to tell you a bit about my ADHD, it was my second year of university and I was coming towards like the end period, like last semester, and yeah, I was really struggling with just, I don't know, everything. Like I felt like for a long time I didn't really understand how to like study or how to like stay on top of the work. It felt like the way that I learned personally wasn't reflected in like my university, and it didn't feel like I was given the tools, obviously because they didn't know I had ADHD, but like it didn't feel like it was some kind of like the way that they taught things wasn't like neurodiverse friendly in my opinion. So it felt like a lot of the information went over my head, and the things that I specifically was interested in wasn't like as depthful as I'd wanted. So yeah, when I got diagnosed, it kind of like made me feel a lot better about myself, because I thought that I needed to just kind of like buckle down, you know, when you're like, oh, I just need to like focus, and like if I focus I can really do it, because I know that I'm completely capable of being able to learn anything. But yeah, when I learned that I had ADHD, it really just made me feel like, okay, this is something that makes sense and this is something that I can work with.
So as a diagnostic criteria, how does it represent in females compared to the male? Because the diagnostic criteria, that females are later on diagnosed with ASD than the male counterparts. They seem to be picked up at a lot younger age. Why is that? Does it completely represent differently in females and males, or is there they're not written inside diagnostic criteria?
Yeah, I mean, I think my particular area of specialization is ADHD. So anything I say about autism sort of maybe is not my top area of specialization. But broadly speaking, what we understand is, yes, I mean, they used to say, you know, ADHD is the disorder of young boys that can't sit still in the classroom. And that is being challenged now because we're recognizing that with ADHD, there's not only the sort of more external impulse control issues, which often manifest as that child that's getting up, that's climbing under the table, that's, you know, clawing at the window, that's putting their arms out, that's, you know, impulsively moving the body. But there's also that feature of it, which is the inattentiveness and the ability to manage the mental movements of the attention and the imagination. And so there's one hypothesis that suggests that the reason boys are often more diagnosed more early is because they have more of those hyperactive components. So it's more obvious. The hyperactivity is more obvious because it's in the body rather than in the I like to call them the mental movements. Because it's the same thing, right? We have to manage the mental movements. We have to put the brakes on. We have to stop the wandering mind. We have to pull back from imagining that we're running around in a forest with our friends and climbing trees rather than sitting in a maths class just staring at the clock like wanting it to be over. So I think that with boys, often it's coming out more in those physical bits. And maybe for the female, not always, but often for the female, it might be more internal, inattentive aspects. But also we were discussing, weren't we, that there may be some differences in the male and the female around ability to blend in.
Yeah.
Ability to fit in even when you don't. And for the purposes of the video as well, you know, we're going to use this language of the masculine and the feminine, the male and the female, and, you know, perhaps some of that is feeling a bit outdated to some of the younger viewers, but it's a good sort of shorthand, I think, if they will allow us to use that language.
I think the diagnosis is important just in terms of like, I think pre-diagnosis, I held a lot of like thoughts about myself, like, I'm not someone that can be relied on. I'm not someone that can show up for people or show up for myself. I'm always kind of like clutching at straws. I'm just kind of a mess. And also like when people would ask me, so why do you do this thing? Or like, why do you navigate in this way? I never have the answer. And it would be something I'd be like really ashamed of. Post-diagnosis and like also just the research, because before I got my diagnosis, I did a lot of research by myself about ADHD and what it was. And I went to the university and said, hey, I think I've got ADHD. Can you guys like help me with this and stuff like that? So I felt like in that time period, it was, I don't know, I was learning about ADHD, but I was also learning about potentially myself. And then when I got the diagnosis, I don't know, it's like a period of kind of like looking back at all the experiences that you had with a bit of like grief and like sadness that you'd wished that I personally wish I'd known, because I was so hard on myself, and maybe other people were also kind of hard on me, or like I feel like people can be because they don't know that you're dealing with something, or that the reasons why you navigate this way is because like your brain works differently maybe to a neurotypical person. So I think it really helped me in being a lot kinder to myself and kind of like getting to the root of how do I want to navigate the world, what makes me feel the best, because I feel like the way that I am is important for the person, what I personally feel like I can do with people. I don't think if I didn't have my neurodivergence, if I didn't have my ADHD, I don't think I would have connected with certain people that have changed my life, for example. So I feel like it's such an important part of me. I don't see it as a separate thing. I think it's just part of Insta, it's just part of who I am. And I feel like, that shame part, that was like a big thing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it may be that for young girls, there are these other environmental and social pressures that help them to shape into something that society finds more acceptable, So it's then not aired until later on.
So that's what we call the masking, because I think some people find it, and I couldn't grasp it at first when someone says females mask more, so that's why some of the whether it's ASD, ADHD is not sort of like picked up earlier. And I struggled with what masking was, and I was like, well, what do you mean by masking? They're one person in the work or school or community, and then someone else, so like later on. And I think you gave a really good explanation of what that was and what it involved.
Yeah, the term masking, I think, is a good example of how language has been created by communities of people that have lived experience, you know, and particularly through the internet and your TikToks and your social medias, to create language and concepts around ADHD that don't necessarily match or correlate with anything that would be in the actual diagnostic category of the things that I'm looking for to see, you know, does this person have this issue? And masking can have a number of meanings. I mean, essentially everybody is masking. I mean, when we go to work, everybody puts on a mask.
Yeah.
You know, we're not exactly the same at work as we are at home and with our friends, nor should we be. I mean, depending on your job, but, you know, mostly it is important that we have, you know, a persona that is usually a bit more inhibited, a bit more sort of circumspect and polite, and, you know, because we're at work.
Yeah.
These are not our friends. It's not our partner.
Yeah.
It's not our parents. So everybody has a mask of sorts. And hopefully everybody has a place where they can freely be themselves. But I think the experience of people with ADHD is that quite a lot of their energy, and I would maybe say particularly for females, quite a lot of their energy goes into passing for normal.
Yeah.
And it may also be that there isn't even a place at home where they can really be themselves, because those societal pressures to act in a certain way, you know, be quiet, put your hands down there, be less.
And when we say passing as normal,
Whatever that means.
yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think it's with the females that we see sometimes the inability to want to fit into a perceived collective, so to speak. I think back in the day we used to call it the it crowd. I want to be sort of like part of that and one of them. I think now it's become more obvious with their difficulties, whether it be communication, emotional aspects seem to present quite highly within ADHD. I think it has quite an emotional effect on some of the young girls that we see and that we work with, because that friendship group is not necessarily in the same format that they would generally, everyone else would generally be acceptable as a friendship group. So sometimes they want friendships, but it's the inability to have and friendship, and sometimes they don't, and it's the accepting that actually just smaller groups is better, or they may just have one close friend.
Yeah, I mean, relationships is such an important part of our human experience, isn't it? And, you know, anybody that thinks about relationships in a deep way recognizes that attention and presence are key elements of, you know, healthy relationships that can deepen and be nurtured and mature. And so if you have problems with inattention, you can imagine how that might play out when you're trying to develop friendships that you can maintain and sustain, because it may be difficult for you to pay attention when somebody's talking to you or sharing something that's important. And it's not because you don't care.
Yeah.
It's because your mind has wandered off, or a sensation has landed in the mind that's become so compelling that it's pulled your attention away. But of course, the experience of the other person is they were not listening to me.
Yeah.
I mean, my sister is actually super adept. Even when I'm on the phone with her, she's like, you've started doing something else, haven't you? I mean, she can tell, because we know each other really, really well. But even on the phone, she can tell, like, when my mind has gone elsewhere, or I've started, and then she just says, I'm not talking to you anymore because I know you're not focusing on what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, what's great about that, and I'm jumping ahead because we were going to talk about what are things that people can do, but one of the things that I do in conversations with her, or people I give them permission to do with me, it's like I ask that question: what's the quality of your attention right now? How much attention can you give me right now? If it's 20%, but it's a task that needs 100%, let's not do it.
Yeah.
If this is something really important and you need 100% of my attention, I'm not going to talk to you on the phone, running to the tube, late for an appointment, thinking about what I've forgotten, because I'm not with you.
Yeah.
If you just want to ask me like, oh, what color shoes should I buy? And I just go red, I mean, fine.
Yeah.
I can give it to you with 20% attention. But if you're telling me something that's really important, or you really want me to understand, or you really want me to think about things with you and for you and alongside you, if I say, look, I can give 20% of attention, let's not do it. And I think that's what I love about that intersect between the mindfulness world and the ADHD world, is it invites conversations about the quality of attention, how much attention we've got. And these are things that are not relevant just for people with ADHD. It's relevant for everybody.
I think it's that. No, we had the discussion around how specifically people now are there's so many phones, tablets, devices. There's so much that our attention is probably shortened, and I think that's everybody's attention shortened through definitely since when I was a kid to now what young people and young adults sort of like deal with now. What effect does a short attention span have on the relationships with that individual girl? So is there a high risk of depression because of social situations not working to?
Yeah, so I mean, let's kind of loop back. So in terms of forming relationships, again, there's a huge variety of people's experiences, but the novelty-seeking aspect of the attention brain, this desire for newness,
Yeah.
can often make people with ADHD sometimes the life of the party, because they want to talk to everybody. They're really interested. You know, the sort of social butterfly, the nature of the social butterfly is I land on multiple flowers, but just for a short period of time. So there can be this sort of quite painful paradox where you're both, you know, you're the life of the party, but you go home alone.
Yeah.
You know, you're very social, you're good at making connections with others. Often people with ADHD are quite empathic. Maybe it's because they've had difficult emotional experiences, so they have more empathy for others. Sometimes they're the life of the party because they're doing really crazy, impulsive things, you know, which is like egging everybody else on. So, I mean, that was definitely my experience. I mean, I was always like, oh, let's climb on the roof, you know, those sorts of things. Where's Tamara? Oh, she's climbed into that wine barrel over there. Or, you know, I mean, definitely like, I mean, I was lucky. I wasn't growing up in the city, so I got into kind of naughtiness rather than...
You could climb trees if
rather
you
than
to,
like criminal kind of naughtiness that would get me in trouble with the law. But I think if you're in a city, you're much more likely to maybe do naughty things that would get you into trouble, a bit more serious trouble. So there can be that aspect, which is like, you know, having lots of friendships, but none of them are really that deep.
Depth. Yeah.
I don't know, the way that I dealt with like maybe having ADHD and not knowing about it was I tried to be as perfect as possible. So I would say things in the way that I think people would like get, or like, you know, make them feel the most comfortable, regardless of if it didn't make me feel uncomfortable. So like for a long time, I didn't really know, it almost forced me to not be able to know how to say how I felt, even though I felt it so deeply in myself. And I think it kind of like materialized in other ways in my life. Post-diagnosis, since I've kind of like know that about myself, it's almost like that bursting feeling when someone, like an example I was giving earlier is like my friend, she's like one of my closest friends, known her since I was a kid. But sometimes if there's something that I want to say to her, whether it's something really personal or not, and like I want to tell her like my opinion about something, a part of me, like especially if it's something that's like so to the point, like I'm like, oh no, I really don't think that, or like, yeah, I think that, like I think that's really wrong, for example. I can feel myself like being like, oh no, I shouldn't say that, but at the same time I feel like I have to, and for me it feels like lying. Like it's the truth versus a lie. And if I feel something so deeply in myself and I don't say it, then it's a lie in my eyes. So I have to say it, but then at the same time I think that it's It's because it's like it's based on my reality. So it's like if I'm not saying the things that I see in my reality, then what is true and what is not.
So when we think about the brain, I mean, you know, attention and emotion systems of the brain absolutely interact. Yeah, this is why if we're feeling, you know, stressed out or angry or annoyed or we're feeling some strong emotions, it can sometimes be hard to concentrate for anybody. Yeah, so and I think that's the point for the audience to recognize. These brain-wise principles are probably relevant to everybody, but they're amplified in ADHD, and there may be aspects that are less possible to change in ADHD because there might be this underlying genetic way that the attention network has been tuned or developed. And there is some evidence to suggest that in these kind of key brain networks, that they're operating in a slightly different way in ADHD and autism, that the connectivity between those regions is different in some way. You know, some might say compromised, others might say, no, it's just different.
So how can we then support a female with ADHD within social environments or community environments? So what is it that we need to be aware of with a female? How can we look at knowing that this is not rudeness, this may be inattentiveness, it may be something else? What is if you get a scenario of where someone would walk into an environment, and what things should we kind of notice?
I think the thing that people often kind of get into most trouble with socially is the interrupting. And I mean, we were kind of doing that earlier on as well. And I was like, the words, you know, the thought was there and it wanted to come out of my mouth. And then you were trying to say something. And then I was like, no, let me just finish. So often it's that talking over or interrupting can sometimes be a sign that, you know, the brain's braking system isn't quite functioning in the same way. So we can think about the brain's braking system a bit like a muscle. And it's perhaps a bit underdeveloped in ADHD, which means that when the thought comes and the brain starts organizing the apparatus to send the signal out through the brain into the mouth to start making the words and talking, in a non-ADHD brain, the ability to do that, it can be activated more easily. And I sometimes do that. I'm literally doing this. Because I can feel the thoughts arising. It's like I can feel that the words want to come out. And I just have to make a physical. And I'm inside, I'm just going, just wait.
So is that the thing we would say that people, neurodiverse or autism, that are quite, I think we spoke about being blunt as well. So it's not only stopping interrupting, but it's actually where
what they're saying.
I think I say no filter. Some people have no filter, do they? And then they blurt something out, which again in a social situation could be deemed as quite rude and quite, you know, inappropriate sometimes as well.
Yeah, there's the PhD that I did, the first PhD that I did was on something called theory of mind. And theory of mind is this ability that we have to make a best guess about what's happening in the mind of another. And we use that, we don't know fully, but I'm sort of making some guesses and assumptions about you and who you are. And then I'm using that to sort of regulate my language and my interactions. And so I'm kind of taking care of your mind as I interact with you. And there's a sort of a subset of this theory of mind, which is called the faux pas. And there's actually tests that we use in experimental psychology. One is called the faux pas test. And it's things like, you know, you go to your auntie's wedding and your auntie has got a new hat and you think the hat is really, really ugly and disgusting. But your auntie is going around saying to everybody that she loves the hat, that she spent a lot of money on the hat. She thinks the hat is the best thing that she's ever owned and she's going to wear it every day until she dies. So given that contextual information, somebody that's got intact or good or working theory of mind
Yeah.
will be doing these sorts of calculations like, okay, I think the hat is ugly, but she really loves the hat. She thinks the hat is great. If I say the hat is ugly, the person that thinks the hat is great might be hurt or might be upset. But if you've got no filter, or you've got some kind of challenges with theory of mind, or those brain networks are not quite joined up in the same way, or don't quite work so quickly, you might just go, that is such an ugly hat, Auntie.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Auntie will be sad, and Mum will be like, shut up. Pull you by your ear and take you to another room.
That's then nothing, and I think that's where the confusion is, isn't it? That's nothing to do with I don't care. That I'm saying that because I don't care about your feelings. It is literally that impulsivity that they can't then stop that voluntary bit of information. And is that because they feel that there's an overriding emphasis on saying that bit of information because they then feel that that information is really important, and then the importance of that information needs to be said, and it needs to be said at that right time.
I mean, it could be a variety of things.
Yeah.
It could be a variety of things. But I think from what's been interesting for me is doing the mindfulness training, which is essentially a training in attention, as well as awareness of what the mind is doing, sort of has been pivotal for me to almost like understand a little bit more about the internal mechanics of my mind. And, you know, it's kind of decades that I've been practicing. So it's not something that necessarily comes quickly. But what you begin to notice is like what really struck me, and it kind of only came a few years ago, is that when a thought, when a thought lands in my mind, it's so heavy.
Yeah.
It's so heavy, and it's got this gravitational pull around it. And it just wants to come out. So it's not even that I'm motivated to say anything or I think it's important. It's just, it's like feels like a big, heavy star or a galaxy or something. I mean, it's just got this, and it lands so heavy and it wants to be expressed. And I only really noticed that recently, and I just became really fascinated by that. Because when I use that language with some of my clients that I work with, they're kind of like, yeah, that really resonates. They're not necessarily able to kind of spot it in the same way, but they say, that really resonates. I'm just pulled. So if I'm talking to you and this thought comes into my mind, it's very easy. I'm still looking at you, but my mind has gone over to this thing here, which is, you know,
So is it
did I
bad?
feed the cat or whatever it was?
So is it bad then to stop that thought? Or is it, so what I'm trying to get at is that there's a better understanding of it and a more awareness, then people won't have to stop them thoughts, because how does that affect them by stopping it all the time? It must be kind of very stressful and impactful. But if the wider community could understand it, then that would have to be done less. So that it would have a better effect on the person with the ADHD.
Well, I think we're finding our way with that.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, I don't think it's skillful to just be like, oh, there she's just got ADHD. Don't worry, she's just going to say things. I mean, that feels a bit patronizing.
Yeah.
And also, then they might be saying something that is really important, and somebody goes, oh no, they just say things, when actually they could be saying.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something there around, you know, the social niceties. You know, so could the auntie respond by saying, I have a different opinion.
Yeah.
You know, I have a different opinion. I like it. I don't like that hat. It's ugly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I've got a different opinion. Rather than collapsing in a heap because a kid has said they don't like your hat, rather than mum freaking out about, oh my God, he's made a faux pas. Oh my God, there's something about almost like neutralizing it with a kind of a matter-of-factness that meets it in a way.
And I think to have that, I think you've got to have a willingness and openness to hear a different opinion, haven't you? And I think there's that flexibility that needs to be had within that conversation.
And I think it's more, I think this kind of faux pas, I think, is more, I would say, linked with autism than ADHD. I mean, there is now what we think is potentially this new category of odd ADHD.
Which is, which I've read about.
Yeah, but again, I think as a science and as a profession, I do think we're just feeling our way into this. But it seems to be, I mean, the number of adult women that I now know who are saying, oh, I've been diagnosed with odd ADHD. And then I'm kind of like, so what is that? That's the inattentiveness and you've got the bluntness,
Yeah.
Or are you just a woman who speaks her mind?
Yeah.
Right. And society doesn't like that. So they have to call you autistic. I don't know.
So then when it comes to the overdiagnosis,
Yeah.
there's a lot of talk around where I've seen some people say that it's being overdiagnosed, ADHD and autism, neurodiversity. Is there such a thing as overdiagnosis, or is it that we're more aware of it and actually people have?
It's likely to be a mixture of both. I mean, my personal opinion is it probably is a bit of overdiagnosis. If you go with the sort of old school epidemiology, which is like, okay, on average it's 1% or 4% of the population, maybe it's underestimated, could be 10%. We've gone from like 4% to 40%, which even if you account for we're suddenly picking up loads of people that we didn't diagnose, seems like quite a big jump for it to be a true phenomena. But maybe my age is showing and I'm a little bit more tilted to that old school way of thinking about things. But I think the other thing we do need to be really careful of is it's a massive business.
Okay.
Less so in the UK.
Yeah.
But we were talking earlier and I mentioned that, the whole phenomena of ADHD, for the skeptics, they trace it back to a particular paper that was published by an American psychiatrist who's sort of, one of the top names in ADHD. And the number of diagnoses in America, leapt exponentially after that paper was published. And it turned out that part of his funding came from a drug company. So given the nearness to, drug companies and what we know about what their motivations are, which is to make a lot of money, there's a skepticism there for me.
Yeah.
And also now the very fact of diagnosing ADHD is now a huge business. I mean, the number of clinics that are springing up, some of them not great, I have to say. So I would really say to anybody, think carefully about whether getting a formal diagnosis is actually going to help you or not.
Yeah.
If you are interested in the medication route, a formal diagnosis is necessary, and probably by a psychiatrist who can also do the medication and monitor it. I've worked with different sorts of people. Some say they want to try without medication. Others are saying, I tried for a bit, but then I went on the medication. It was a miracle how different things were for me. And it's I think, an individual choice. I wouldn't say like everybody with ADHD needs medication, but it's probably less than we think.
I've also think
if they've got conditions to thrive.
Yeah.
Right. But if you haven't got the conditions to thrive, you probably
there's a bit, isn't there, around over reliance on the medication. It is everyone's right choice to have it, but then there's also a business within diet and nutrition as well, isn't there? And about what we eat, how that affects the brain and what we can do. I think we also spoke about with some with ADHD what strategies they can help within the community and work environment. So I spoke about having staff that were late and they've got ADHD and it's the inability to be on time. Although I'm accommodating as a charity and what we do, it's about them having strategies to then help them. If you could give a like one tip.
Yeah, I think, so we're talking about this sort of time underestimation, which is a kind of one of the more typical features of ADHD, which was, not anticipating how long things are going to take. So essentially that's an executive functioning problem because you haven't ordered and structured and allocated the appropriate amounts of time to the different parts of the task. So you know, oh, it'll just take me 2 minutes to get out the door, becomes, okay, actually, no, I need to get my bag, and then my bag didn't have my phone in it, and then my charger was in the car, and then this, you know, so 2 minutes is actually 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So my top tip is, however long you think it's going to be, double it, and just experiment with that, maybe for a week. You know, and it's particularly when you're going places, isn't it? It's getting to appointments, it's meeting friends, it's, you know, I mean, I've I've worked with several clients that like ended up at the wrong airport, you know, I mean, this level of inattention.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I thought I was supposed to be at Gatwick, but I went to London City Airport and I missed the plane because I didn't check the ticket. So there's something about, it is about slowing down.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the whole thrust. I mean, you know, my work with mindful movement, the first session is slow, you know, pause.
Yeah.
Wherever you can, slow down to see more. And of course, for the ADHD brain, that's torture, but you're training the brain's braking system. So the more you can slow things down, then the more you can see, which gives you more opportunities to get organized and put your strategies into place. But of course, if everything in your body is kind of about go, 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 and I can do it in 2 minutes, and, you know, it's a training, it's a discipline.
Does physical activity help? And in specifically, like I always say that boxing is one of them activities where it's kind of like, it's not the kung fu, the martial art, which also helps, but it's a, where you're on the bag, you're hitting, you're in a mindfulness like environment just by itself, but you're also moving a lot, and it's a quick movement and stuff. So how does that affect and help with the ADHD?
I feel like the boxing, I think movement, and also just kind of like, feel like I didn't realize how out of tune I was with my body. I didn't realize how much stress and anxiety and just like bored up tension I had in myself constantly, and how that would come out in the way that I'd speak or in the way that I'd think. So boxing genuinely kind of like has made me feel like I know what my body is, I know what I can feel inside myself, I know where something feels right, and I know when something feels wrong, because it kind of like trains me to really be in tune with myself in that way. And I think that I'm still got so much more work to do in terms of like communication and like learning how to be more, I don't know, like concise and like to the point with what I want to say. But I feel like it's made my mind a lot clearer. It's made me less anxious, and it's made me feel so much like I know that I am capable, but then it shows me because I can see it in my boxing. And I think the way that I feel about myself is reflected in the way that like I navigate through the world. So I think boxing has honestly changed my life
You say then in a nutshell that you feel it's empowered you.
completely. I think I, since I was young, I feel like I've always never been pushed to do sports, or I was always told like, as like a girl, it's not something that I should be interested in. I always really liked like sport. Like I was never good at it, but I loved sports. I loved things that boys liked, and that's something that I didn't have the space for. And I think with boxing, it's kind of like taught me I have that, like I can be aggressive, I can be like, I can fight, I can be a lot more than what the world might have said I am. And in that way, I feel like it has empowered me and just kind of taught me a lot more about like my capabilities as a person.
Yeah, so we talked about how just movement can help to modulate the attention and help with focus. But when we get to the bigger, more physical movements like boxing, I mean, there's just so many good things that are happening there. So one is when we're moving the body in a coordinated way, we need to pay attention. Definitely when we're learning the movements, and that's maybe where to be a bit more thoughtful about the learning process for people with ADHD. But then certainly once we've learned them and when we're executing them, we need to stay on track, don't we? We need to stay on track with the sensations coming into the brain from the body about the positioning of the wrist so that we don't hurt ourselves. We're making decisions about force and effort. You know, the brain is doing so many things. So there's something about moving and moving at speed and moving with precision that demands our attention. And it actually really pulls the attention to the point that people will say, I'm not bothered by other thoughts, right? And we've talked about that, you know, where do the thoughts go about my worries and my troubles when I'm at the gym? Well, they go into the fist and into the focus, and we're able to let go of them because we've really needed to hone in. So there's that aspect of it. I think for those that have the more hyperactive experience of ADHD, it's also about allowing the energy of the body to be expressed and finding a place to put all that energy into the bag and into the pad. And I'm kind of interested in that because, I mean, it's very, very old-fashioned, but Freud at one point called the ADHD presentation like a type of mania. You know, it was a type of manic, almost like a manic depression. There was sometimes these overlaps there between mania and the presentation of ADHD, because that feeling in the body of like, I need to move.
Yeah.
It is like a kind of emotional energy. It sometimes can feel like this stuff is inside me, and if I don't get it out, like I have to move my body to discharge the energy. And that may also be, you know, something that's different between the males and the females. Females learn to like, you know, put all that fear and sadness and anger in, and males are more allowed to express it, right? Just socially in the West.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's cultural differences.
Someone also described it to me like, imagine you're in a car journey, you've been driving 5 hours, and all you want to do is actually get out, stretch your legs. But then someone says to you, no, you've got to sit down in the car. We've stopped, but you can't get out of the car. You've got to sit in. It's that same thing. Well, why can't I just need to stretch my legs. I really need to get out of this car. I need to like move. It's that kind of feeling, isn't it, that overwhelms that person, that they just, I mean, anyone in a 5-hour car journey would want to get up, but that's using that same sort of like scenario to emphasise to me what it might have sort of felt like.
Yeah, but also think like, I mean, how I think about it is, you know, some of those kids, particularly in going into school, they've already used up everything that they've got just getting ready and getting into school.
Yeah.
You know, and then you just think, oh, and now you've got to be, you know, sitting at a desk. And what is involved in staying still? And it's interesting because, you know, in Tai Chi and Qigong, we do these standing postures, you know, I mean, hours on end. And that's one of the hardest exercises to do.
Yeah.
You know, to do this, standing up for 45 minutes without moving, it's like a test of mental and physical strength. And yet we're asking all kids, sit at a desk and don't move.
It doesn't seem right, does it? It doesn't seem as in a, like, why can't we have kids moving around while learning? Is that not a great way to learn?
It is a great way to learn. It's the way the brain learns. I mean, you know, to be really radical, I think European countries do this much better than the UK. I mean, I've seen some incredible classrooms with climbing ropes, with like weird sort of bunk bed things that kids can climb up and down, you know, and they're allowed to explore.
Yeah.
And that's a fundamental principle of learning, exploring the environment with your body and through touch. I mean, that's how brains are designed to learn. I mean, they're not designed to sit and absorb predominantly verbal information. That's the worst way.
And there's learning styles, isn't it? And it's accepting the different learning styles that individuals have. But I just find it really constraining to tell a young person now that's what you have to do. You have to like sit down. I mean, thankfully my little boy's at an SEN school and it's completely different.
Yeah.
They're allowed to, it's almost like encouraged.
But that's a good question, because when we were talking about like at the gym and how to support those young people that might be coming to the gym, and you know, it's not about making a big deal about it, because you know sometimes that can go a bit wrong, right? And then the person gets into this kind of specialness, slightly victim mode, and it's not about that. It's about saying, look, things might be a bit harder for you, but also you're amazing. You can do it.
you might get there in a different way.
Yeah.
And, you know, I remember when one teacher said to me, like, I just know that you just have to do it in your own way.
Yeah.
And I can tell you till you're blue in the face, but also I know that I just need to let you do it in your own way, and you'll eventually get there. And because I'm a really embodied learner, I have to just like live it and live it and live it. But when I get there, I'm extremely confident in what I know. I mean, to the point that people think I'm being really arrogant, but I'm not, because I'm like, I didn't just read the book. I like lived it, I moved it, I put it in my body, I turned it upside down, a bit like you were saying your little boy was, you know, I turned it upside down, I ripped it apart, I put it back together again, and I, whoa, what's this, you know. So now I'm like, I'm pretty confident about that.
Yeah.
I know it. Like, not just like, oh yeah, I know that. But I know it in the body. So, but it's things like, you know, you can, if you need to step out of the classroom, you can go to the back, you can go to the back over here, you can do a wiggle break, you can do a quiet break, you can do a jumping jack break. You can take care of what your needs are as best you can, not disrupting the rest of the class. But I'm not going to force you to stand in line if you're exploding. You know, don't take the mic.
Yeah.
Right? Some basic rules. Don't take the mic. But if you are struggling and you think or you want to experiment with whether taking a step back over there and doing 20 jumping jacks or sitting still is going to help you to get back in and focus and be with us, that's the intention. The intention is that you're with us and focusing. If you need to be here to do that, let's try it. If you need to be here to do that, there's a space for you to do that. If you need to get a drink of water, yes, you can do that, but don't be hanging out by the water fountain chatting to your friends for 20 minutes. That's not what it's about, right?
Yeah.
It's about what can we experiment that will help you to recognize what do I need to regulate in order to get back in.
Which I think is key and important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
and I also realised that within the young person themselves, and we've discussed this, they change throughout their ages and there's like different needs. And I'm conscious that we've been sitting here quite a while.
I'm looking at me, I'm like,
And we haven't moved. There's sort of like one sort of like pivotal question that I did have that was to be asked, and obviously, and it was around change that you would want to see within systems or approaches. And we often say change doesn't happen in theory; it happens in real time, in real lives. And the question would be, what change do you want to see in your lifetime when it comes to ADHD, young women and girls? Is it that it would be a better understanding, a better diagnostic criteria? Anything that you think this would be the one specific change that I would like to see in my lifetime?
I think the piece that's not spoken about so much in ADHD is the shame. And working with adults who are coming to recognize that they may have had it, sometimes when we're talking about get a diagnosis, don't get a diagnosis, the piece where they often find the most benefit is through a process where you say, it wasn't because you were wrong, it wasn't because you were bad, it wasn't because there's something wrong with you. You know, your kind of your brain is like this, it makes things hard for you. And how not to be ashamed of who you are.
And is that generally more awareness? Because I think it's the wider environment as well, isn't it? For you not to be ashamed, you need to not be ashamed of who you are, but then there needs to be a wider awareness of everyone else, of the understandings of why you are you, isn't it?
Yeah, but you know, to your point earlier, it's tricky, right? Because often people get this: you're lazy, you're selfish, you're too blunt. So, and then you can turn around and say, no, it's not, it's my ADHD, and then the other person's like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? You know. So I think we're in a new landscape now where we're trying to figure out, but there seems to be a sort of a power dynamic that's changing, and it's almost like now the kind of people that have got so-called normal brains are kind of going,
well, now I feel on the back foot,
Yeah.
you know, and then the people that have got neurodiversity are going, yeah, that's what we've been feeling like.
Yeah.
And we need to come back to some place where we meet each other just as we are, you know, probably without labels.
Yeah.
Because I think the labels can ultimately be dividing us. Like, you're a normal, I'm a not normal, you're a typical, I'm not. I don't think either of those are right. I think we've got brains that are really crazy and like we don't know anything about them really. And there's a bunch of genetic factors that seem to be important. There's also a bunch of environmental factors, whether that's diet, atmosphere, technology, that are crazily shaping our brains right now. And, you know, AI will be another level, right? That's a different conversation.
That's a different podcast, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there's some great stuff on that. But yeah.
Well, Tamara, thank you ever so much for coming along today, for joining in the conversation. And one thing we did forget to mention, that you're also a trustee of Five for Change.
I just thought that,
which we'll put in the notes as well. But thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Well, and you know, thank you to you, because I know how you work, I see how you work, and I think it's brilliant, and I think it's taking us in the right direction, and I wish you many mistakes that we can all learn from.
That's the key.
And,
make mistakes, otherwise you don't
we'll be there celebrating failures and moving forwards.
Brilliant.
Thank you.